My guest on Football Geeks podcast this week is quite simply a football writing royalty. Senior writer for These Football Times magazine. His trilogy of books documenting the history and stories of the UEFA European and European Cup Winners' Cup have struck a chord with football fans everywhere. His 2022 book, In the Heat of the Midday Sun, captures the excitement of the 1986 World Cup and is a wonderful journey into football's rich and arguably superior past. He's an enjoyer of the European and global game. It gives me enormous pleasure to welcome Stephen Scragg. Good evening, Stephen.
Oh, thank you for the invite, Phil. Looking forward to it.
Oh, you're more than welcome, mate. Now, the first time that I came across you, I was walking through WH Smith's and I was looking for something to read from a holiday, and I came across a tournament frozen in time. And it was, for me, that was like, like when you're a kid and it's that Panini moment when you get that last sticker in your Panini book. It was a book that I've been looking for, but no one had ever written it. And I saw it on the shelf and it was just like, great, this is it. And it's a fabulous book. And I've read the other three afterwards and thoroughly enjoyed them. So, I mean, you are a fan of continental football, but today we're going to stay a little bit closer to home. Now, your love of the game, as I say, covers the entire globe, but we're going to be talking about the love affair of your life tonight, which is Liverpool Football Club, isn't it? And I asked you to compose your favourite all-time Liverpool 11, along with the formation and a coach who could transpose his ideas onto that Liverpool team. Also, to counterbalance that, I asked you to think about your three worst ever Liverpool games. So for all Reds fans, you included, it's going to be a bittersweet DeLorean ride into football's past. But firstly, we're going to talk about the good stuff. Okay, we're going to talk through Liverpool. First of all, can we just let us know about where your life journey with Liverpool started? How did you become a fan?
Oh, my dad, really. I was the youngest of three siblings. My dad, a big Liverpool fan. He'd actually started out playing in the Liverpool leagues. So he was playing more than, through his youth, he played more than he watched. And it was only into his 20s that he started going on a regular basis. But, he always favoured the Reds. And amongst his group of friends, obviously there were Everton fans as well. So he was part of that generation of the 60s that would go to Anfield one Saturday, go to Goodison the next, and just enjoy, the players on show. If you got that way, you got to watch the likes of Jimmy Greaves twice a season rather than once a season. He'd venture out for away games here and there. If it's Blackburn, if it was a Manchester game or anything like that, he'd stretch out for an FA Cup semi-final here and there and all of that. So yes, the 60s were kind of his era in that respect. Along came kids from the mid 60s onwards. Culminating with me in the mid 70s. And then brother was big. He just followed suit, and he professed his love of Liverpool as well. Wasn't quite as emphatic as I was, I think. In time, other things started to turn his head, but for me, Liverpool remained the first love. So yeah, my sister, couldn't abide football. My mum had just kind of want Liverpool to do well. So her boys were happy. She'd tut at the weekly, gorging a match of the day. We had the kick-off match in the Northwest. We'd even have like a roundup show, preview show on a Friday evening, fronted by, it used to be Gerald Sinstad and then eventually Elton Wellesby would do it. So we'd get a sort of Friday evening. We were quite spoilt in the Granada region. A lot of people say that there wasn't much in the way of football on the TV back then, but we were spoilt by comparison in the Northwest. So we get the kick-off on a Friday night. We get match of the day on a Saturday, kick-off match or the big match, if it was a big enough match to be networked across the Sunday afternoon. And then obviously you'd veer towards kind of like sports night and midweek sports special for your European fix. And then, clicking through a turnstile when your dad could scrape the money, the spare pennies together of a weekend. So, it was just, for me, it was always there. I can't remember a time when football wasn't there. It was like the cat. It was like, the grandma coming round every fortnight for a weekend and stuff like that. So it was just part of the furniture, I'd say, until, you know, and you know, you just, oh, this is the team we support, and you just kind of like follow suit. But 79-80 would be the epiphany, where I was kind of like drawn to it by choice rather than just by kind of like natural order and selection of the food chain of the Scragg family. But yeah, so I'd just jump in there and say the game that kind of like can pinpoint it. It was Liverpool Norwich at Carrow Road, February 1980. David Fairclough have a rare game at that point in time. Scored a hat-trick. It ended 5-3. It was the League Cup final ball that red and white might have won from the early 1980s. And Justin Fashanu scored the goal of the season as well. So and Martin Peters with the Norwich side as well. I always, because that's it, you know, Martin Peters, my recent image of him being a Norwich City player. You know, everything what he did in his career, you know, for me, it's kind of like him at Norwich City, because I remember him being a player, which was really kind of like, you know, an oddity. But yeah, that was the game where I was kind of like fully kind of dragged in, because I had the flame red hair like David Fairclough did. So, you know, I was watching it thinking, you know, that's like me. He's got hair like me. And then I think that love of, or that respect, or that, you know, kind of respecting what other teams could do was born from that game as well, because of that Justin Fashanu goal. That was just kind of, you just had to kind of like admire it, and it was just on the TV for years to come. You know, it was one of those goals that you didn't mind your own team being the punchline for, because it was such a good goal. So yeah, that's where it all sprang from, and you know, throughout the remainder of the 1980s, that was my eye of the storm, really, which, you know, coincided with a great era for Liverpool. But yeah, I not tail off. I've still loved football since, but as soon, I always pinpoint it as being, as soon as squad numbers and names on the backs of shirts kick in, then, you know, I'm a bit more weather worn by then.
Yeah, it was as you sort of alluded to, the mid 1970s through to 1980 were the kind of start of the golden era for Liverpool, weren't they? You've alluded in the past to the 1978 and 79 season when Liverpool kind of reached football perfection, really, in the English game, and that's something that we're going to touch on in your 11 this evening, because there's a strong element of that 78, 79, 80 team in it, isn't there?
There is. I mean, that is my reset Liverpool team. You know, people, you know, you can point to you know, you see if someone would say who's 007. It's Roger Moore, because it was at that point in time. Who is Doctor Who? Well, it's Tom Baker. It's that type of thing. You know, who are the presenters on Top of the Pops? Well, it's Kid Jensen. It's John Peel. It's all of those. It's Peter Powell, Mike Reid, etc. You know, so you have that reset image, and that Liverpool side of 70, 78, 79, 79, 80, and kind of jumbled version of it, 80-81, a very injury hit season. You know, Clementon go, just rattle it off now. You know, Clementon goal, Neil at right back, Alan Kennedy at left back, Alan Hansen, Phil Thompson, central defence, Graham Souness and Terry McDermott in the centre of that midfield, Jimmy Case on the right, Ray Kennedy on the left, and it was David Johnson and Kenny Dalglish up front, and normally the substitute was either Steve Highway or David Fairclough. Occasionally, you know, you get a Sammy Lee or a Colin Irwin, you know, popping up on the bench, or, you know, or so on and so forth. But yeah, you know, and that team just, and kind of like being a young child at that point in time, that team just seemed to be set in stone for like a generation. You know, it was only a couple of seasons, but back then as a kid, it was kind of like, you know, years were decades, and it just felt that Liverpool was that team for like forever. You know, when I was a kid, you know, and it was just a glorious thing. You know, the vivid, they all red as well, and always seemed to be carting off a big shiny trophy, and it was just kind of like, you know, like I say, it was just part of the furniture. It was this amazing team that was on in the corner of the room and on the TV, you know, as much as possible, and yeah, they were just part of growing up and, you know, noticing the world, really.
Yeah, I mean, I must say that I was my football consciousness started about when I was about 8, and there was the 1978 World Cup, and the first season when I was fully invested in football was the 78-79 season. The first European Cup final I watched was when Kenny Dalglish scored the winner against Bruges, and that kind of buffeted into the World Cup. But the side that you picked, although it's got a strong flavour from that era, there's a lot of omissions as well of players who are in that side. I can see, I've looked at your side and I can see what you're looking to build with that side, but in doing so, you've had to omit players like Ray Kennedy, who was an absolutely fantastic footballer.
That's a bit, it is heresy to particularly Ray Kennedy was probably
You're going to make a few enemies
one.
tonight, man.
Yeah, Ray Kennedy was probably the most painful one to leave out.
Yeah.
He was just such a majestic player. You know, he had strength. He had, you know, he could mix it, but he had that delicate touch of the ball as well. He'd, you know, obviously being a striker to start with, so he had the eye for goal.
Yeah,
you know, he was literally, you know, the stereotypical silken midfielder. You know, and that conversion that Bob Paisley had of him from you know, kind of like vague misfit of a striker that wasn't quite gelling, you know, to this left-sided midfielder, and it was the reinvention of the role as well, because, you know, Paisley doesn't get enough credit away from Liverpool, and, you know, people will say, oh, Shankly's team and all that kind of thing, but, you know, the subtleties there and differences. You know, he did away with wingers. You know, he had no wingers really. You know, Steve Highway was a part of the periphery rather than the main part of the side by 78. By the time 78 rolls to an end, so, you know, he had this midfield where, you know, Ray Kennedy wasn't operating as a left winger, Jimmy Case wasn't operating on as a right winger. They were a kind of pinched midfield, and that allowed the full-backs to bomb forward as well. So, you know, Liverpool effectively had like a 6-man midfield when they were on the front foot, and, you know, that's the way it operated. And Ray Kennedy just played this role down to a T, you know, and who looks at a striker and says, well, it's just not working for you, but I think you can be a left-sided midfielder in this. And it's not even kind of like a position that really exists, you know, in English football at that point in time. You know, you have your two wingers and your two central midfielders, and, you know, here's Bob Paisley doing away with them. Yeah,
it does take an air of geniality to just even think that, doesn't it? You have to be a keen observer of football to see that in a player, and then apply.
Genius. Yeah, there's genius of play there to be able to spot that. You know, to look at a player and say, actually, you know, you'd be better suited to do this instead for me.
Yeah. So moving on, we're gonna go through the 11. As I said before, I can see where you're going with this side, because every component has got attacking kind of elements to it. Even though there's defensive players in your formation, they're all creative. So, I mean,
well, I think the best Liverpools have always been based upon. I mean, Liverpool people kind of like, you know, for the last decade and a half or whatever it's been, has kind of like, you know, been big on the pressing game and all that type of stuff, and it's always existed. It's always been there. Liverpool used to, you know, always used to be said of Liverpool that the first line of defence was attack, and, you know, go back to those years and just how much kind of like, you know, Ian Rush used to do it, and, you know, if a team had the ball along the back line, or the goalkeeper was kind of like with the ball at his feet, he'd be in on him, you know, and that was pressing, you know, as people will call it now. You know, it's not some great invention of the last decade or so. It's always been there. It's just been defined in a way that, you know, it never used to be really. So yeah, you know, and Liverpool always had that. I mean, you look at the likes of Alan Hansen, Mark Lawrenson, you know, Emlyn Hughes, Phil Thompson, you know, the central defenders. It's changing the art of the central defensive, you know, pattern as well that Bob Paisley did, or was part of. You know, Bill Shankly needs a nod to that as well, in that they were all midfielders. You know, they all started out higher up the pitch, and, you know, and it's that simplicity to it. It's kind of like, well, you know, why can't your defenders be able to use the ball? You know, because you know, it's going to facilitate your midfield, and the midfield facilitates the forward line. So, you know, as much as kind of like, you know, your strikers are your first line of defence, your defenders, you know, can be your first line of attack as well.
Yeah. It's a kind of the libero kind of ideal, isn't it? Put your best ball player, put your best footballer in the centre of your defence, because that's where it all starts. And funnily enough, that's how Liverpool were the first side that I ever saw play from the back. It was so alien in the late 70s to see a team, the goalkeeper roll it out to the fullback, and then there'd be an interchange of passes and an actual construction of play, rather than just like, okay, keeper bounces it 2 or 3 times and then lofts it upfield.
Yeah, I mean, Liverpool had a few lessons in the art across the 60s and the 70s, and people will point to Red Star Belgrade, which is often cited as the epiphany of that, and the Liverpool side of 73-74, the season I was born, kind of did that alteration of central defence that, we kind of shifted Phil to Tommy Smith and Larry Lloyd aside, and it was Emlyn Hughes and Phil Thompson who dropped back from midfield, and but there's a little bit disingenuous in that, is that Tommy Smith could play as hard as he could play as well. Yeah. And Larry Lloyd was kind of like, the lumbering kind of, blocker of a traditional central defender. Yeah, he'd go up for corners and score goals. So, he was an attacking threat in a more traditional way. But, that Liverpool defence kind of fell together a little bit almost by chance as well, because, Chris Lawler had picked up an injury early in the 73-74 season, which, that was covered by Tommy Smith moving from central defence to right back, with Hughes dropping into central defence. And then I think it was the early February that Lloyd picked up this, I think it was a ligament injury or knee injury of some description, and that meant Phil Thompson fitting in, and then suddenly it all just clicked into place. So, Larry Lloyd was still playing central defence for Liverpool a good, 3 or 4 months after the, this game against Red Star Belgrade. But there'd also been like Ferenc Varos as well, and Beckenbauer had been to Anfield in both 70-71, 71-72 in the first cup and the Cup Winners' Cup. So Liverpool had viewed this way of defending, up front. So this eureka moment of the Red Star Belgrade game is a little bit of a myth, at play as well. Quite probably the last straw, the straw that broke the camel's back in the change, in making the switch of playing the way to play out of defence. But it had been a slow burner rather than this epiphany, I think, that is often cited.
Yeah, they certainly learned from those difficult lessons that they observed in those games, though, didn't they? So cracking on, Steve, we're going to go into the team now, into the 11. So, I mean, first off, can you tell me what formation you've gone for and why you favoured that formation?
Well, having mentioned this kind of progressive 4-4-2 formation of Bob Paisley's, I've gone completely differently. I've gone a different route. I've gone kind of like the more contemporary Jurgen Klopp-esque 4-3-3, which I mean, the thing with formations is that the football isn't Subbuteo, and they tend to be just a position to fall back on when you are the team that's under pressure. Football doesn't adhere. It's not table football. It's not Subbuteo. Players don't stay where they are, and that formation is a fluid thing. Yeah. But it's just been a joy to watch these last 7 years or whatever it is that Klopp's been there, and the way that they play, despite the success, take the success aside, just can't tell you how much fun it's been to watch this version of Liverpool. And it just brings a smile to the face, which for contemporary football is a lot harder to do than football of the past. We reminisce about football of the past, and maybe avoid some of the uglier parts of it and just remember the good parts. But at the minute, I think there's so much about football that's easy to dislike. I think when you do find something that you love, then you should embrace it. And Klopp's version of Liverpool has just been epically fun to watch.
Yeah, I think he's made a lot of Liverpool fans fall in love. every fan has loved the club for years, but really sort of refined that kind of passion that had been kind of that had ebbed away slightly chiefly because of the modern game and the way that it's kind of formatted now, and the money and all the other ugly things that we sort of like connect with modern football. We will be talking about ugly football later in your worst three as well, because there's a couple of teams who are in there that were renowned for ugly football. But let's go to your starting 11. So we've got your formation 4-3-3. We've got your coach, who's of course Jurgen.
I've gone for Jurgen. I was spoiled for choice there, but I've gone for Jurgen.
Just because of the way that his football makes you feel. Is that?
He's a man that's kind of like out of kilter with the contemporary game as well, and I think that's what kind of like makes certain Liverpool fans love him as much as they do. Yeah,
he's a great guy. Even as an outsider looking in, he just appears to have everyone in his thrall, and he seems like a thoroughly genuine and nice fella, doesn't he? He's
got a side to him, that you don't want to get on the wrong side of that. But at the same time, my God, he's just been amazing for us.
Yeah, people say that it's easier to sort of like get somebody's attention with a kind word and a sharp stick than just a sharp stick. Isn't it? So,
yes.
Yeah. So I think you've got to have that element if you're a manager, haven't you?
You do. You certainly do.
So going in, you're number one, you're custodian of the sticks, Steve. Who have you chosen? There's a fine kind of fine pedigree of Liverpool goalkeepers, isn't there? But you've gone for an old classic who harks back to those glory days of the 70s.
I have, but again, spoilt for choice. There's so many great goalkeepers, even going back. To kind of like, way 100 years. So, Sam Hardy was arguably Liverpool's first truly great goalkeeper. Elisha Scott, the Tommy Lawrence in the 60s. But, and then, Alisson Becker, absolutely adore him. He is, there's a goalkeeper and then there's a Liverpool goalkeeper. And all of these have been Liverpool goalkeepers. A lot of times Pepe Reina, believe there's some questionable kind of like politics out there now that's been floated in the last few weeks. But as a goalkeeper, he was, absolutely magnificent, really. And he's kind of like being airbrushed a little bit. People have a bit of revisionism or just how good he was or wasn't. But I have him up there amongst my top 3 or 4 Liverpool goalkeepers. Bruce Grobbelaar, for all his faults, for all his, the tumultuous side of him, you could pull off saves that no other goalkeeper would manage. The athleticism of him was unreal. And, more he matured, through the mid to late 80s, he was way up there amongst the best goalkeepers going. And he was perfect for Liverpool as well. But I had to go for Ray Clements when push came to. I had to go for Ray Clements, and having spoken about kind of like defenders having been midfielders, Clements was notorious for playing outfield in the five-a-sides at training and being quite a handy player as well. So again, this concept of the sweeper keeper, which harks back to Tommy Lawrence as well. So that whole concept of the defence playing higher, being able to play the ball, being able to cover the ground, and if it's an opposing team had hit the ball high over the top of the defence for strikers to run onto, 30, 40 yards from goal, there's Ray Clements kind of like mopping it up and, being able to use it with his feet. Something that's continued through Grobbelaar and, certainly now Alisson, does it, without a shadow of a doubt. But Clements, he was just unreal. Some of the saves he made, he was the consummate professional. He was a natural goalkeeper as well. He wasn't, some goalkeepers had to kind of like just work, and they were fine goalkeepers by repetition of training and all that type of stuff. But Clements just was an utter natural. His agility, his covering the ground. A true penalty box and beyond goalkeeper, and some of the saves he made, point to the 1977 European Cup final and crucial saves that he made with the score at 1-1. And how the following years might have gone against us. He was truly incredible goalkeeper, massively talented, and it should have been him winning the 120 odd caps for England. In my view, it might be a biased one, but I think some Dave Bowler's great for this. Is the West Brom fan who does some of the These Football Times podcasts, and he'll side with me on podcasts with this. He favours Clements over Shilton with no compunction and having no attachment to Liverpool whatsoever. So I always cite Dave Bowler in this argument.
So you've always got an ally when it comes to the Shilton Clements debate.
I do.
But it was just for keepers that time was just immense, wasn't it? Because we had so many great options. I mean, there was Joe Corrigan, there was an insurgent kind of incumbent, Gary Bailey, and even like lower down there was like Tony Godden, and there was just this incredible plethora of fantastic goalkeepers. Jimmy Rimmer as well.
Paul Cooper at Ipswich, Jimmy Rimmer. Paul Cooper at Coventry, at Ipswich as well, and lots of fine goalkeepers that were Phil Parks at West Ham, previously at QPR. He'd been the most expensive goalkeeper in the world for a short period of time, and yes, there was just a glut of fine goalkeepers in that era.
Yeah, but Clements did sit right at the top of that tree, along with I won't go into the Shilton debate now because there's obviously some bad blood with that. But no, he was and in 78, 79, he was conceded 16 goals in 42 league games as well, which was another. I don't think that's been broken. That hasn't been broken, has it? I don't think it might have been equal, but in less games. I'm not sure if Petr Cech came close to it, didn't he, for Chelsea? But say in fewer games and a different era of football. To be honest, when some games are won as soon as the fixture list has been made. Another mention, of course, we should mention Pat Jennings there amongst that set of goalkeepers. Who he was, I think, for me, the only one that I think Clements could bow down to really in that era. Yeah. Great keeper, mate. Great keeper. So we move on into the kind of go right fullback role. Who are you picking in that role? Because there were some fabulous fullbacks for Liverpool who've been omitted from this, but you can only pick one. So who have you gone with, Steve? You could, and again, this is a position that's again well catered for. Chris Lawler before my time, but he scored 50 goals for Liverpool, none of them penalties. Known as the Ghost, because of his ability to ghost in at the back post and pick out a goal, and an amazing fullback. Ronnie Moran as well, prior to him. So Liverpool have had a rich history of fine right backs. Tommy Smith played some of his best football for Liverpool at right back between 73 and 77. 78-ish, the 74 Cup final, one of the finest, right back performances. His part worth looking up is the part he plays in the goal. If you're not familiar with it, the third goal Liverpool scored in the 1974 FA Cup final, and obviously, Tommy Smith known as the hard man, the Anfield, the Aintree Iron, and all of that. But what he could do in football. Falls under the radar, and just look up that final goal in the 74 Cup final. And the part he plays is stunning. There's a lovely layoff, one-touch layoff he does as part of that, and the interchanging passes, and he plays two parts of facilitating that move, and it's it's a wondrous thing to watch as a team goal goes. There's not been many better. Certainly don't think there's any been better scored by Liverpool in an FA Cup final as far as the team goals are concerned. Obviously Phil Neal would come, Steve Nicol, who was amazing as well. Phil Neal was just stunning. He is the atypical Liverpool right back, utter legend of the club.
So many games, and I think he had a run between something like 75 and 80, 85 where he only missed about one game. It was unreal. The consistency and his presence was unreal. Obviously, Steve Nicholas has mentioned Rob Jones, another honorary mention. Was a fine right back. But I've gone for Trent Alexander-Arnold. The people slate his defending, but there's different ways. It depends what the team you're playing in. Roberto Carlos, Dani Alves. A couple of fullbacks that don't get the defending. Never got their defending quite picked apart in the way that Trent Alexander-Arnold does. But the number of assists that he's made is just frightening. For a right back. And still so young as well. So much of his career ahead of him. Obviously, we don't know what will happen in the future. We've had players. Everyone's had players that they get to kind of like 22, 23, and you think, oh, you can carry on doing this for another 10 years or so. But then the injuries hit, and side B is never quite as good as side A was, and and all of that. But as things stand, the lad's done everything he needs to do already in his career, and he just keeps on churning out. The balls that he plays are unreal. The assists. His eye for goal. The free kicks he takes. The way he puts his foot through the ball, and I love the way that he can mix it. He'll be one of the first in. Chest to chest when anything's kicking off. And that just kind of like eye for the esoteric as well.
I was just about to say that, mate. Yeah, I was just about to say that.
Like, that's
the
like
things that he sees, the things he sees.
He just sees things so quickly, and this role that he's got now, where it's kind of like midfield and it's right back as well, and I just think he's a stunning footballer, and for me, as things stand, time will tell whether he can keep it going to the length of a Phil Neal could. But as things stand right now today, I wouldn't pick anyone else.
No, I mean, and as you alluded to, like the England role he's presently taken up, that number 10 role, he seems ideally suited to that as well, doesn't he? Because his range of passing and his skill, and he's elusive. He can go by players. He rarely loses the ball. He's just the consummate footballer, isn't he?
He's the type of player that could pull off any position, and it's the way that he switches sides as well. He'll pop up on the left as well when playing for Liverpool. It'd be absolutely anywhere on the pitch, and he has got the talent to pull off any kind of role, really. Look at Steven Gerrard when he was kind of like younger, and he made his breakthrough into the Liverpool side at right back and looked the part, he ended up playing like right side midfield, centre midfield, split striker and all that, so he had that talent to be able to carry off, virtually any position. I still to this day say that, we could have got another extra couple of years out of him as a central defender. And Trent Alexander-Arnold's similar. I think there's at least 6 or 7 positions across that team, if not more, that he could nail, magnificently.
Yeah, he's got that Pirlo-esque element, hasn't he? When his legs have gone, you can imagine him sitting in that number 4 role and just spraying the ball about all game long. And he fits perfectly within the constraints of your side, because it is, as I've said earlier, it's a very attacking side. So we're going to go to the other side on the left hand side of defence. Who's your left fullback in this 4-3-3 formation, Steve?
I've gone for Trent's partner in crime, Andy Robertson. I think in left back we don't have as many kind of like clear cut, options as right back. Left back's a slightly more difficult role to nail, I think. It's the bass player of the team. It's or the drummer. It's kind of like the slight afterthought. And we all Alan Kennedy, Joey Jones, all kind of like cult heroes, but I think it was a bit like the Ringo Starr effect, where people would say Ringo Starr wasn't even the best drummer in the Beatles. and all that type of stuff. And Alan Kennedy, for all his time at Liverpool, he was probably never quite the best left back in the Liverpool squad at that point in time. Emlyn Hughes was still knocking around when he first arrived, so who could also play left back. Mark Lawrenson was signed, who initially kind of like bothered him for the left back role while he was waiting for centre back vacancy to pop up. Jim Beglin came along, who himself was a wonderful left back. His career cruelly curtailed by that horrendous injury. That horrendous left back. That just kind of like was the first domino effect in a succession of other injuries that just denied him the career he should have had. But yeah, for years from Jim Beglin to Andy Robertson, Liverpool really struggled for a proper kind of career left back. A lot of our best left backs were auxiliary right backs. Rob Jones covered the role really well. Steve Nicol covered the role fantastically. Even Glenn Johnson, played some of his best football for Liverpool as a left back rather than a right back. People will look at John Arnorisa, but I always felt he struggled at left back because he was just so one-footed. It was unreal. He was always better as a left-sided midfielder than he was a left back. We had brief glimpses of how good Fabio Aurelio could be, for instance. David Burrows was consistent, Steve Staunton, but a lot of them were short-lived. Gary Ablett had a spell there and could have carried on the role for a few years, but so it tended to be kind of like a left back we weren't quite sure about, or someone who'd slot in as a bit of a makeshift left back and do a good job of it. So yeah, but certainly between Beglin, probably Burrows, and Staunton. But I say Burrows and Staunton had that battle for the number 3 shirt for quite a long time, for a few seasons, and then both of them kind of like vanished. The folly of Graham Souness bringing in Julian Dix, for instance, which was unreal. Like Stig Bjornaby was another one that came in that could be, he could look a world beater one day and he could look a part player the next. Which was just mad. But Andy Robertson, he came in and made the position his own. He had to fight for the place to start with, but I think it just made him more determined, and his stats are unreal as well. For assists, and the two of them just complement each other in a stunning way, similar to how Phil Neal and Alan Kennedy did. Alan Kennedy wasn't the greatest player in the world, but he was the right left back for us to have. And he was a cult hero and always in the right place at the right time for the big moment. He had the winning kick in 2 European Cup finals. Scored goals in multiple League Cup finals, and he had that knack. And Andy Robertson's just kind of like he's cult hero and magnificent left back at the same time. He's great going forward. He's tenacious in the tackle. His defending is magnificent. His timing of the challenge is just brilliant, and that kind of like that stir that he has as well. And he doesn't care about reputations as well. He's mixed it with Lionel Messi and and all of that. And he treats a Lionel Messi the same as he'd treat kind of like whoever's playing for Exeter in an FA Cup game on a Friday night down at St James Park or whatever. He just has that air about him, is that because and where he's come from as well. Having the knockback from Celtic as a kid, and coming through, Queen of the South on a pittance, and having to supplement it with work elsewhere, Dundee United, Hull, and he'd earned it. And the fact that Trent came through the youth system through the academy, and we got Andy Robertson for about £7.5 million or something. The two of them combined for that kind of money in this era, and the service that we've got out of them is just phenomenal.
Yeah, it was incredible. I think he came in 2017, didn't he? I think it was somewhere near between 7.5 8 million mark, wasn't it? Which is just an incredible bargain for a player of his ability. And as you say, he's got that kind of. If he was Italian, you'd say petulance and arrogance. But it's a healthy arrogance in a team, and I always feel that.
he's the type of player that if he's in an opposing team, you'd absolutely hate him. You know, and I hate that's, if you're an opposing player, you would hate going up against him. But you know, you'd want him on your side. You'd look at a player like that and think, God, yeah, we'd love that type of player. You know, and you know, thankfully we've got him, and he's, you know, like I say, he's the best left back we've had since the days of Jim Beglin, who, you know, was shaping up to be a really fantastic left back. You know, because again, there's a player who started as a left-sided midfielder, so he had all the attacking intent of, you know, the knowledge and the know-how to be an offensive player as well as defensive.
Yeah. So moving on to the right-hand side of defence again, sort of sidling up against Trent Alexander. Who's the centre half who's going to occupy that role?
I'm going for Alan Hansen there. You know, he could interchange. He could go on the left. I think you know, in my team they will swap and change. But yeah, Alan Hansen. Just you know, until, you know, his partner, who will come to as you know, showing up on the radar as just the best central defender I've ever seen in a Liverpool shirt. You know, that ease of the ball, and I think it's the fact that, you know, there's just no. I mean, people would say, you know, that elegance about him, and it's become a stereotype. It's, you know, people kind of like, you know, tut at the phrase, but that's what he was. He was just so, he'd glide across the pitch. You know, his control of the ball. You know, the way he'd bring it forward in that Norwich game that I mentioned from February 1980. One of the goals that David Firkoff plays. The part he plays in it, he carries the ball from central defence to the edge of the Norwich penalty area before laying it off to Firkoff to you know, smash it home. And when the ball is back of the net, the vast majority of the Liverpool players go to celebrate with Hansen for his part in the goal rather than to Firkoff for his scoring of it. Yeah, he just had it all. You know, he and again, another player who'd started in midfield. You know, so he just had that calmness about him, and you know, you'd have your defensive parts of the game, but you'd never fear it, because, you know, it's all right. Hansen's gonna, you know, sort this out, and, you know, the way he could just drop off, he had that, you know, that third eye. He already knew what was coming, you know, and, you know, so his positioning was incredible. Yeah, his use of the ball and all of that. I remember hitting a screamer against Norwich at Anfield. Would have been about 80, 81. You know, so, you know, he could even hit the ball from distance where he needed to. Yeah, he was just a joy to watch, and I think alongside the partners he had as well, you know, from Phil Thompson to Mark Lawrence and Gary Gillespie as well, that shouldn't go unmentioned. You know, even Glenn Hussein towards the tail end. You know, he had an ease of understanding with all of his central defensive partners, and, you know, he really was the man that, I don't know, set the benchmark for the way a Liverpool central defender should be playing. You know, and that's saying something, considering those that had preceded him.
Yeah. I think, people who don't know about that era don't know what a great player Alan Hansen was. He was absolutely, as you say, composed, good on the ball, and just a kind of a bastion of calmness, wasn't he? In that Liverpool.
Yeah, you say he was. You know, people used to call him Beckenbauer at Anfield and stuff like that. You know, he was the Scottish Beckenbauer, and he had that grace about him, that you know, air of superiority, not air of superiority, just an air of brilliance about him. You know, and he'd just, the way he'd bring the ball forward, instigate attacks, and break up, you know, opposing attacks as well, and he'd just dovetail all of his partners perfectly, no matter how different a type of player each of those were. He'd just, you know, slot in seamlessly alongside, you know, whoever you cared to play alongside him.
Yeah, and to his left, you've ventured into the modern era, haven't you? You spoke briefly about the person who's going to play alongside him. Can you tell us who that is? It's going to come as no surprise to Liverpool fans, I would imagine. No,
it's Virgil van Dijk. You know, he is, you know, the reincarnation of Alan Hansen, the player. He's got every attribute that I've already mentioned about Alan Hansen, and he's got that and he's cool with it as well. He just looks like nothing bothers him. He's just completely unruffled, and covering that ground, and he's already seen that third eye nature of I know where this is going. He's just been an utter joy to watch, and we've had some other, great fine central defenders over the years. Sammy Hoopier, in between the two, Sammy Hoopier has been excellent. Jamie Carragher, works so hard in that role, and his intelligence, gameplay intelligence was remarkable. Daniel Agger, had a lot of time for Daniel Agger, who was, again, that type of central defender that could bring the ball out of defence. And, I always loved that type of player far more than the Martin Skirtles of this world, who were just like the uncompromising kind of like boulder. There's a place for them, but that shouldn't be Anfield. I want my kind of like central defenders to be the likes of Virgil van Dijk and Alan Hansen and Mark Lawrenson and Phil Thompson and Emlyn Hughes. They're the central defenders I want in my team.
It's definitely.
It's just the class that they use and exude, and the calmness that they transmit to the rest, and not just their own defenders, as well, but the rest of the team. To have that kind of like that reassurance that someone like that's there behind you. It has to be a wonderful thing.
Yeah, fantastic, man. I agree with you totally. Yeah, you want a defender, and in this case, two defenders who can carry the ball, who can pass the ball, who are composed and kind of bounce off each other as well. So if one goes, one drops, and vice versa. Yeah. So we're going to move into midfield now. Now you've got your midfield troika here. So we're going to stay on the right hand side of the midfield. Who have you picked as your right midfielder in these wingless wonders of yours?
I'm going for Steven Gerrard for that role. Okay. Yeah, Steven Gerrard's occupying that role. He did play under Gerard Houllier some compelling football on the right hand side of midfield, but this right hand role, it's a roaming remit, as all these midfielders will have. But yeah, so he's nominally there, but yeah, Gerrard was just an utter force of nature. One of the finest Liverpool players I've ever seen. And carried Liverpool through some really abject seasons as well, at times, and was part of some incredible rises as well. Under Houllier, under Benitez, that title chase under Brendan Rodgers as well. He was metronomic. And I was at the Millennium Stadium when Gerrard scored that goal to salvage the cup final in 2006. Right, I can always still see where I was today, up in the far corner, so the end that Gerrard scores, up on the curve in the top tier, and it was just just remember hearing the announcement of just how much injury time there would be. Kicking our heels a bit, thinking, are we going to skate it, or are we going to find a way out of this or not? And we shouldn't have doubted it. He caught that ball perfectly, and it was just one of the most amazing moments. And this just a year after Istanbul, luckily enough to be in Istanbul for that as well. So being there and present for so many of those incredible moments that he provided, that drive and again that eye for kind of that perseverance, and that drive was just. It could be frightening to watch, even with him on your side. It was kind of like, oh God, what must it be like to be on the end of that? He deserved to play in better Liverpool teams than the ones he did. A lot of the time, and but his love for the club just overrode. He would. Like his emotion would get the better of him sometimes, and he wasn't perfect by any means. I thought there was always a period of time when Carragher probably should have been captain, just to kind of like alleviate some of the pressure from him. I think that would have been an option. at one point, but he just epitomised everything that Liverpool should be when we weren't always collectively that way at that point in time. But he was as important across all of that period of time, even when, because it was all peaks and troughs. That 30 years between the 18th and 19th titles, it was all peaks and troughs. Very, very near, but not quite. Back down, come at it again, and Gerrard was part of that. But he just maintained that kind of, that drive, game in, game out, season after season. I was there. He climbed from the bench to make his debut against, was it Sheffield Wednesday at Anfield. I was at White Hart Lane for his first start in a Liverpool shirt. And I'll put my hands up and say that at the time we had a midfielder called David Thompson, who was, he had a lot of drive, and I always preferred David Thompson at that point in time, and thought he was the one that should have, shows how much I knew. We can all profess to be experts, but I was wanting David Thompson the side rather than Steven Gerrard back then. But he proved himself to be, just the best Liverpool midfielder, since Graham Souness, basically.
Yeah. No doubt. I mean, when you've got that incredible drive, you've got that ability, and the work ethic as well. You got one hell of a player there, haven't you?
Yeah. I for goal again as well. He could hit them from any distance, and and then he'd be there in the penalty area, score the scrappy ones, score the worldies, and again, he could play so many different positions as well. A lot of football that he played early in his Liverpool career was at right back. I remember having a blinder in a Merseyside derby. I think it was 88, 89. We'd not won a derby for about 5 years, and he cleared one off the line in the final seconds to ensure a 3-2 win at Anfield, and stuff like that. And just that kind of, he had that desire, that love of the club, and he played like a supporter, but like a supporter who had all the talent in the world as well.
Yeah, that's what you want, isn't it? Yeah. So when I was looking at this midfield, I was wondering how you were going to structure it, because there was so, like you say, that interchangeability of players that you've got in this kind of mix of players. It's difficult to know where you're going to put them, because they're all so adaptable, and also they could play anywhere along that midfield. But just put me out my misery. Who's going to be on the right hand side of your trio?
Oh, I've had Gerrard down the right.
Sorry, left hand. Yeah, sorry, mate. Left hand side.
Down the left. McDermott. I'll be Terry McDermott down the left. As a kid, Liverpool fans of that era, of my age, we all adored Kenny Dalglish. Dalglish was the king. So if when you're the king, you don't need to be a definitive favourite player of a supporter. So we'd all love Dalglish, and that was a given. But then we'd all have our favourite player who was like one of the others. And for me, it was McDermott. My first Liverpool game was November 77, the European Super Cup against Hamburg. The second leg, Keegan's return, and we won 6-0. McDermott scores a hat-trick. And he'd been on the outside looking in. His first couple of years at Liverpool hadn't been all that easy. He'd been in and out the side. And we're 76, 77. He'd started on the outside looking in, and then found a way into the team. And even before he'd found his way back into the team, Paisley was in the press, and he was saying that I feel sorry for him because of the way that he's doing it in training, he's playing, he's doing everything he could possibly need, but there's just no space for him at the minute. But as soon as he got that chance, he was in there, and he was just so metronomic. And even by November 77, he was still having to do it to keep his place. There was no certainty that you keep your place in that team. But the goals he'd score, you'd look at kind of like the semi-final goals in 77 against Everton. The way he picked on Tottenham, that FA Cup quarter-final goal in 1980, that kind of flicks it up and hits it on the half volley is just ludicrous. The 7th and the 7-0 at Anfield in 78. His lob, his chip over Jim Leighton at Pittodrie in 80-81 in the European Cup, and it's the style of the goals, and He just had this, again, another, myself and Haida Jawad, a friend of mine who he's written for kind of like, many publications over the years. He was, started out at Liverpool Echo. I think he was chief football writer at the Birmingham Post for a bit, and then went off to the Nationals. And we chat and say, when we come to the topic of McDermott, we both agree that he is the world class player that no one considers, because the football he could play was phenomenal. Just that exuberance about him, and again that piece of skill, that eye for the pass as well. You can look back to so many crucial first goal in the European Cup final in '77. I'd say look at the goal that he scored as well in the 1979 Charity Shield against Arsenal. That's a wondrous goal too. He had this habit of scoring these absolutely aesthetically beautiful goals, but he was so much more than just that. He was just the perfect midfielder. And he had that mischief about him as well. There's another friend, I can't remember who it is now, but he always mentions a game at Ellen Road in the late 70s, and Liverpool suckered Leeds in, kind of like sitting back, and then kind of like bang off, and they went and downfield, and McDermott had instigated the move by doing a kind of like a cavalry call, and off they went. And he literally kind of like played the bugle, an imaginary bugle, and off the score down the other end, scored, ended up winning 3-0. And it was kind of like he was just So he was my kind of player. He was my Dalglish was the king. Terry McDermott was my my other favourite player at that point in time. And I think looking back, I don't remember much of that 77 game against Hamburg. Remember the greenness of the pitch, the coldness of the night, the turnstiles, everyone being huge, and being quite scared by it all. But obviously, he left some kind of impression, because he just remained my favourite player over that period of time. And I couldn't pick a favourite Liverpool 11 without him.
No. My favourite Terry Mack moment is the pass that he plays for Ray Kennedy in the 1978-79 season that Ray Kennedy latches onto against Derby in an away game at the baseball ground, and it went on to win goal of the season that year. And he just pings it in between the kind of defensive two who are very tight. They're as you say, pinched together. But he finds that small crack of space, no more than a sliver. And the take from Ray Kennedy was brilliant, but the pass was fantastic. Yeah,
so it's that vision that he had, and the energy that he had to burn as well. I mean, you look at the 7th goal that he scores when we beat Spurs 7-0 at Anfield in, was it September 78? And this is the Tottenham. They've just come back after a season down in the 2nd division. The Hoddles there, they've just signed Ardiles and Villa. Peter Taylor's part of that side, and a massively talented Tottenham side that Liverpool just kind of like dismantle ruthlessly that day. And the 7th, McDermott kind of starts it by laying the ball out to one of his teammates from the Liverpool 6-yard box. And I think there's only about four passes as it goes. It zigzags its way across the pitch, and Steve Highway angles the cross in at the far stick there on the angle of the penalty at the Tottenham 6-yard box. And this is about 10 seconds from one end of the pitch to the other. There's McDermott getting his head on the end of it, and it's absolutely stunning. He could do absolutely everything. Yeah, absolutely adored Terry McDermott.
Yeah, talk about box to box, mate. Yeah,